Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Bradley had always been meticulous about important dates. By 38, he'd learned that small gestures made all the difference in a marriage, and Melissa's 40th birthday deserved something special. He spent weeks planning every detail. He booked a table at the Harbor House, the most upscale seafood restaurant on the coast, the very same place where they'd had their first dinner together a decade earlier, when they just moved to town. That distant night, fresh off the move and full of hope, they'd toasted new beginnings as the sun set over the ocean through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows. Bradley wanted to recreate that magic, to show Melissa that even after all these years, she was still his priority. On the afternoon of that special Saturday, Bradley arrived at the Harbor House 30 minutes early. He carried a carefully wrapped gift, a silver bracelet with charms representing key moments in their relationship, something he'd ordered 2 months in advance. The restaurant was as elegant as ever, spotless white tablecloths, subtle floral arrangements, that quiet, refined atmosphere of a high-end establishment. Bradley checked the reserved table, strategically placed near the window with a view of the sea. Everything looked perfect. The champagne was already chilling in an ice bucket beside it. That's when a waiter approached. He was young, barely over 20, slender, with a serious expression typical of someone who took his job seriously. His name tag read Julian. Bradley smiled, ready to ask for the wine list, when Julian tilted his head slightly, looking confused, and asked the question that would shatter everything. "Oh, so the other husband isn't coming tonight?" The silence that followed felt like an eternity, though it probably lasted only 3 or 4 seconds. Bradley blinked, processing the words he'd just heard. "Excuse me, what did you say?" His voice came out lower than he intended. Julian immediately realized he'd made a terrible mistake, or maybe not exactly a mistake. The expression on the waiter's face shifted to something between discomfort and resolve. He glanced around quickly, making sure no other staff were nearby, then leaned in slightly toward Bradley. "Sir, I need to speak with you privately. Could you please follow me to the back for a moment?" The urgency in Julian's voice was undeniable. Bradley felt his stomach tighten, a physical sense that something very bad was about to be revealed. He stood up mechanically and followed the waiter through the main dining room to a small service area in the back, away from the curious eyes of other guests. There, with his hands nervously clasped, Julian began to speak. "Sir, I don't know exactly how to say this, but you deserve to know the truth. Your wife comes to this restaurant regularly. Every Wednesday night, without fail, for almost 2 years. She's always with the same man, and they act like a couple. They sit at the same table, share dishes, laugh together, and by the way they carry themselves, anyone would think they're husband and wife. I assumed you were that man, until I saw your reaction just now." Bradley had to lean against the wall. Each word Julian spoke felt physically painful, like punches to the chest. "Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain it's my wife?" He pulled out his phone, hands trembling, and showed a photo of Melissa. Julian nodded immediately, without hesitation. "It's her, sir. I'm certain. I serve them personally almost every week." The waiter went on, and that's when the story grew even more disturbing. "Sir, I need to be honest about why I'm telling you this. It's not just because I think it's right, even though I do. It's because your wife and the man she's with treat all of us on staff with absolute disrespect. They're rude, make absurd demands, complain about everything even when nothing's wrong, and in almost 2 years, they've never left a proper tip. Last week, your wife humiliated me in front of a full dining room because the bread I served was too warm. She made me go back to the kitchen 3 times, each time with a different complaint. My manager nearly fired me because of the scene she caused." Julian took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm 23, sir. I've worked here 4 years to pay for college. I wake up at 5 a.m. to study before my shift, work from 3 to 11 p.m., and try to do it all with dignity. But every Wednesday, when I see that couple walk in, I know I'm going to be treated like I'm invisible, or worse, like I'm less than human. Last week, when she humiliated me, I decided that if the real husband ever showed up here, he deserved to know who he's really married to. Bradley felt sick. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the cruelty. Melissa, the woman he'd shared a life with for over a decade, the person he thought he knew deeply, was capable of this kind of behavior? He'd always seen her as kind, polite, someone who treated everyone with respect. Or had she changed, or had he never really known her at all? Can you give me more details? Bradley asked, his voice steady now despite the pain. Julian nodded and gave precise information, the exact time they arrived, always between 7 and 7:30 p.m., the table they preferred, tucked into the quietest corner of the restaurant, the dishes they usually ordered. He described the man, tall, mid-40s, dark hair with gray at the temples, always dressed in expensive suits, with a distinct southern accent. He always paid with a corporate credit card. Bradley thanked Julian sincerely. He shook the waiter's hand and said something that came straight from his heart, "Thank you for having the courage. I know it wasn't easy. And I'm sorry for how you've been treated." Julian simply nodded, relieved he'd done what he believed was right. Bradley left the restaurant without waiting for Melissa. He sent a quick message saying he'd had a work emergency and needed to cancel dinner. Melissa replied with sad emojis and understanding messages, saying she'd always understand, that she loved him, that they could reschedule. Each word now felt like poison. In his car, parked on the street in front of the restaurant, Bradley took a deep breath and began thinking clearly. He wasn't the type to act on impulse, but he also wasn't the type to let this slide. He pulled out his phone and opened the location-sharing app he and Melissa had used for years, something they'd started for convenience, to coordinate schedules and meetups. He'd never checked the history before, he'd trusted her completely. Now, with hands that trembled slightly, he scrolled back through Melissa's location history, specifically for Wednesday nights. The pattern was undeniable, and devastating. Every Wednesday, without exception, over the past 18 months the app allowed him to view, Melissa's location showed she was exactly at the Harbor House, arriving around 7 p.m. and leaving between 9 and 10. But on those same days, when Bradley got home from work, Melissa always said she'd just come from her Pilates class on the other side of town. She'd arrive home around 10:30 p.m., in workout clothes, hair tied up, talking about how intense the session had been. It was all a perfectly rehearsed lie. Bradley drove home on autopilot. It was nearly 8 p.m. now, and Melissa was probably in her Pilates class at that very moment. Or rather, she was at the restaurant with the other man, sitting at the corner table, laughing, sharing an expensive dessert, treating the waitstaff like garbage. The anger rising in Bradley wasn't explosive, it was cold and calculated. He didn't just want to confront her, he wanted to fully understand the extent of the lie before he acted. When he got home, to the renovated Victorian house they'd bought together 5 years ago, Bradley went straight to the office they shared. Melissa's laptop sat on the desk, as always. She'd never been particularly careful with passwords, always thinking there was nothing to hide. The irony now was bitter. Bradley knew her password, she'd never changed it since they bought the computer. He opened the laptop and logged into her email. It took only 15 minutes of searching to find what he was looking for. Melissa had created a folder inside her email called Archived Projects, a generic, unremarkable name. But inside that folder were hundreds of emails exchanged with a man named Garrett Thompson. Bradley started reading, and each message was a blow. The earliest exchanges dated back nearly 3 years. They'd begun professionally. Garrett was a regional manager for a luxury hotel chain, and apparently he and Melissa had met at some corporate event she'd attended through her job as a marketing manager for a tech company. The initial messages were innocent, basic professional networking. But within weeks, the tone shifted. Garrett began commenting on Melissa's intelligence, her beauty, how she was different from every other woman he'd ever met. Melissa responded with shyness at first, but soon matched his intensity. In 2 months, the messages were explicitly romantic. Within months, the exchange revealed a secret, intimate relationship. Bradley had to stop reading several times. The pain was physical. He vomited once, running to the bathroom and letting out all the anguish he'd been holding in. But he came back and kept reading. He needed to know everything. The messages revealed regular meetings, not just Wednesday nights at the restaurant, but also hotel rooms on Thursday afternoons, when Melissa claimed she had extended client meetings. There were weekend trips she disguised as business conferences. Bradley remembered those trips. He remembered being alone at home, sending her sweet messages wishing her luck on her presentations. All of it was a lie. What hurt most was the level of planning. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a momentary slip-up. It was a meticulously constructed, carefully maintained double life over years. Melissa had become an expert at lying, at creating alibis, at managing two parallel realities. And she was good at it. Bradley had never suspected, not for a second, until that night. He saved all the emails into a separate folder and sent copies to his own email, ensuring he'd have proof even if she found out and tried to delete everything. It was nearly 11 p.m. when he heard Melissa's car pull into the garage. He closed her laptop, put everything back exactly as it was, and went into the living room. He sat on the sofa, lights off, waiting. Melissa came in through the kitchen door, as she always did. Still in her workout clothes, the perfect performance. "Hi, love. I'm so sorry about dinner tonight. Can we do it tomorrow?" She walked into the living room and turned on the light, freezing when she saw Bradley sitting in the dark. "You scared me. Why are you sitting in the dark?" Bradley looked at her for a long moment. It was astonishing how normal she looked, how genuinely kind, how genuinely loving. "How was Pilates?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. Melissa smiled, completely unaware of the trap. "It was great. Tiring, but great. The instructor made us do that new routine I hate." She moved closer to kiss him, but Bradley stood up, putting distance between them. "Funny," he said calmly, "because your Pilates seems to happen at the Harbor House every Wednesday night. Or should I say, your romantic dinners with Garrett happen there." The color drained from Melissa's face instantly. She froze completely, like she'd been turned to stone. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I was there today," Bradley continued, each word measured and precise. "I arrived early to set up your surprise birthday dinner. You know who greeted me? Julian, the waiter you regularly humiliate. He asked me if the other husband was coming too. Confusing, right? He thought I was the other guy because, apparently, you and Garrett have treated everyone at that restaurant like garbage for almost 2 years." Melissa tried to speak, but Bradley raised his hand. "No. You're not going to talk now. You're going to listen. After Julian told me everything, I came home and read your emails. All of them. 3 years, Melissa. 3 years of lies. 3 years of you building an entire parallel life while I was here, believing every word that came out of your mouth." Tears began to fall down Melissa's face, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of panic, from someone caught and knowing there was no escape. "Bradley, I can explain. Please, let me explain." Her voice was desperate, broken. "Explain what?" Bradley asked, and now there was cold irony in his tone. "Explain how you became an expert at lying. Explain how you treated people who served you with contempt while playing house with another man. Explain how every Thursday afternoon, when you said you had meetings, you were actually in hotel rooms. Explain it, Melissa. I'm listening." She tried to move closer to him, but Bradley stepped back. "Don't touch me." The words came out like ice. Melissa collapsed onto the sofa, her whole body shaking. It was a mistake. It started as a friendship and got out of control. "I never meant to hurt you." I still love you, Bradley. Please, believe me. You love? Bradley almost laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You love so much you spent 3 years lying to me? You love so much you built a weekly routine of betrayal? You love so much you humiliated a 23-year-old waiter who's trying to pay for college? That's your love, Melissa? He walked over to the desk in the corner of the room and picked up a folder he'd prepared while waiting for her. Inside were printouts of some of the most revealing emails, the location history from the app, and a list of dates and locations he'd compiled. He dropped the folder onto the coffee table, the papers scattering. This is the evidence of your version of love. I spoke to a lawyer on the phone 2 hours ago. Tomorrow morning, we start the divorce process. Melissa panicked completely. No. Bradley, please. We can fix this. I'll end it with him. I'll never see him again. We can do couples therapy. Please, don't throw away everything we built. Bradley looked at her, really looked, and saw a stranger. You already threw it away, Melissa. 3 years ago. I'm just recognizing the reality now. She tried to argue, to beg, to promise change, but Bradley was beyond reach. He picked up his car keys and a small suitcase he'd prepared. I'll sleep at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk again, but only through lawyers. Don't try to contact me directly. I don't want to hear any more lies. He left the house, leaving Melissa crying on the sofa, surrounded by the evidence of her own betrayals. The following months were a blur of legal procedures, asset division, painful conversations through attorneys. Bradley discovered that in their state, proven infidelity weighed heavily in divorce rulings, especially with extensive, documented evidence. Melissa tried to contest it, tried to minimize it, but the proof was irrefutable. The process took 6 months to finalize. Bradley kept the house, secured most of their shared investments, and walked out of the marriage with his dignity intact. Melissa tried reconciliation several times during the process. She sent long, emotional messages, showed up where she knew he'd be, even tried talking to mutual friends to plead her case. Bradley blocked every channel of communication and kept contact strictly through lawyers. He had no interest in revisiting the past or giving her another chance to manipulate him. As for Garrett, Bradley never confronted him directly. He didn't see the point. The man was irrelevant, just a symptom of the real problem, which was Melissa's conscious, continuous choice to betray. But through mutual acquaintances in the corporate world, Bradley learned Garrett was married and his wife had never found out. He briefly considered telling her, but decided it wasn't his responsibility to clean up other people's messes. He had his own life to rebuild. The final divorce hearing took place on a chilly autumn morning, almost exactly 1 year after that never-happened birthday dinner. Bradley and Melissa sat on opposite sides of the courtroom, their lawyers speaking in legal terms about dissolving a partnership that had once meant everything. Melissa cried throughout the hearing. Bradley signed the papers with a steady hand, no tears, no hesitation. When the judge declared the marriage officially dissolved, Bradley felt something close to relief. It was the end of a painful chapter. 1 year and 3 months after that revealing night, Bradley was rebuilt. He'd moved into a modern downtown apartment, closer to work, with a view of the park. His career was thriving, he'd received a significant promotion. And through friends, he'd begun casually dating a woman named Sophie, a graphic designer, 2 years younger than him, with a dry sense of humor that made him laugh genuinely for the first time in a long time. One Saturday afternoon, while walking with Sophie along the shopping district near his new apartment, Bradley saw Melissa for the first time since the divorce. She was leaving a common department store, carrying generic shopping bags. The transformation was shocking. Her hair lacked the professional care she'd always maintained, her clothes were simple and unflattering, her posture was that of someone carrying the weight of the world. She looked 10 years older than she really was. Melissa saw him at the same moment. Her eyes widened, and she tried to smile, but it was a fractured, desperate smile. She took a step toward him, but Bradley simply gave a brief, polite nod, like he would to any distant acquaintance. Sophie sensed the tension and held his hand a little tighter. "You okay?" she asked quietly. "I'm okay," Bradley replied, and it was true. He kept walking, didn't look back, didn't feel the need to know how Melissa was or what had become of her life. That chapter of his story was closed. A few weeks later, Bradley did something he'd been planning for a long time. He returned to the harbor house for the first time since that fateful night. He asked to speak with Julian and found out the waiter was still there, now promoted to assistant manager, having graduated from college. Bradley greeted him warmly and left a generous tip with a simple note, "Thank you for your courage. It changed my life for the better." Julian read the note and smiled, a genuine smile from someone who knew he'd done the right thing, even when it was hard. Bradley dined that night in quiet peace, enjoying the seafood he once associated so strongly with Melissa, but which now was just excellent food in a beautiful restaurant. He was alone. He'd decided to come without Sophie because he needed to close this chapter personally. As he watched the sun set over the ocean through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he reflected on how life can change completely in an instant. A single question from a courageous waiter had shattered his reality, but also freed him from a lie that might have gone on for years. Sometimes, Bradley still thought about that night, about how different things might have been if Julian hadn't had the courage to tell the truth. He'd probably still be married to Melissa, still trusting her, still being deceived every Wednesday night. The pain of discovery had been unbearable, but the alternative, living a lie indefinitely, would have been worse. He was grateful, in a strange and complicated way, for Melissa's cruelty toward that waiter, because it was that cruelty that finally brought the truth to light. Life moved on, as it always does. Bradley learned that trust, once broken so completely, can't be mended, only replaced by something new and different with someone else. He learned that people can hide who they really are for years, that masks can be worn with terrifying perfection. And he learned that courage comes from the most unexpected places, sometimes from a 23-year-old waiter who decides justice matters more than keeping secrets from rude customers. When Bradley left the restaurant that night, over a year after the initial revelation, he felt light. The past was exactly that, past. Melissa was a painful memory growing more distant each day. And the future, for the first time in a long time, seemed full of real possibilities, built on honest foundations. He had survived the storm and emerged stronger on the other side. That was all that mattered. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.